Chapter 11. Words, Words, Words. I do love words. One time when I was about 12, I was coming out of Muller's ice cream parlor in Amsterdam, and across the street outside the university bar and grill, my pal Mickey was kicking the shit out of a Juilliard student. The kid was a classical musician with long hair. 1950, that was the only long hair there was. And Mickey's yelling, "You long-haired fucking music prick!" Long hair fucking music prick. Great. I wrote it down. Another time I heard this guy Chris calling Mrs. Kohlers a kraut cunt. Kraut cunt. Also great. I wrote that down. Some guy came home from the service, and I asked him what it was like being in the Army. His reply, "Fine if you don't mind waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning with some burly, loudmouth cocksucker yelling at you." Burly, loudmouth cocksucker. Great rhythm to that. Loud, burly cocksucker. Not the same at all. I wrote that down. Soon I had a list of about 10 of these. Sure enough, my mother found the list, with dire results. She threatened me with psychiatry. But 20 years later, the list bore fruit. It contained all the 7 words you can never say on television, a.k.a. the 7 dirty words. Arguably, the best-known cut from my breakout album, Class Clown, which in turn spawned all the pieces on the ways we use, misuse, and abuse words I've done in the 30-odd years since. FM and AM came out in January '72 and was an immediate hit. It quickly went gold. The AM to FM premise seemed to click with people. In the early '70s, the feeling that something freer and fresher was emerging from the violence and confusion of the '60s was pervasive. Just 4 months after FM and AM came out, I recorded Class Clown. I realized that these pieces had been incubating and building for a long time. Held back by my own uncertainty, now they were bursting out of me full-blown. I used to be Irish Catholic, now I'm an American. You know, you grow. I was from one of those Irish neighborhoods in New York, a parish school. Corpus Christi was the name, but it could have been any Catholic church. Our Lady of Great Agony, St. Rita Moreno, Our Lady of Perpetual Motion. I've been gone a long time now. It's not even a sin anymore to eat meat on Friday. But I'll bet you there are still some guys in hell doing time on a meat wrap. With Class Clown and Occupation Fool in 1973, which was really part 2 of Class Clown, I had a sense of coming alive, of experiencing myself fully, of great potential for further exploration. Each time I shone light into a new corner, I discovered new passageways. What I had been doing before had been limited and closed, a cul-de-sac. This new approach had an open end. It stretched off into the distance and the future. All 3 of these albums eventually went gold, and FM and AM won me my first Grammy. They also benefited from being on the leading edge of a new boom in comedy albums. Albums had been the medium of choice for rock and the counterculture, which both rejected and was rejected by television. It was natural for our new humor to use albums, too, as our medium. That's at the heart of the 7 words you can never say on television. Even though it's been possible for a while to say some of them, sometimes on television, it's still one of my favorite pieces, if for no other reason than the grief it caused people who deserve to have grief caused to them. You know the 7 words, don't you, that you can't say on television? Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. Those are the heavy 7. Those are the ones that'll infect your soul, curve your spine, and keep the country from winning the war. Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. Those are the 7 you can never say on television under any circumstances. You just cannot say them ever, Not even clinically. You cannot weave them in on the panel with Doc and Ed and Johnny. I mean, it's just impossible. Forget those 7. They're out. There are, however, some two-way words, like prick. It's okay to prick your finger, but don't finger your prick. So suddenly there was money. The college dates I'd wanted began to come in. Not huge yet, $3,000 or $4,000 a pop, but some of them the kind where you got a guarantee versus a percentage of the gross. If you packed them in, those could be big. I had money. I felt terrific. So why not get more cocaine? To do Class Clown, which I recorded on May 27, 1972, I had to say to myself, I want to be sharp and clean and clear tonight. No cocaine. My diction on it is remarkably lucid. In other words, I was already using enough cocaine that I had to think consciously about not using it to record an album. But it was a great time. I felt so free, so flush. It was such a catharsis, such a coming to terms, such a reward. It was proof that I was right. Fuck you people, look at this. Not only are they going for it, it's good, too. I needn't have been worried about success. Lily Tomlin once said what an embarrassment it is to be a success in a mediocre culture, and I'd always been fearful that if I had mass appeal, I wouldn't have substance. So I was happy that I had substance and yet was getting all this attention, approval, applause, approbation, affirmation, all those A's I never got in school. I had a deferred adolescence. In my actual adolescence, I was already thinking like an adult and making adult decisions. Then in 1967, as I'm entering my 30s, along comes a youth-oriented culture that attracts me for political reasons, but for other hidden reasons, too. Oh, there's something I didn't do when I was that age. They're burning a car. When I make the identity full and complete, and it includes what I do for a living, and as an art form, I say, let me tell you about when I was a kid. I'm just like you. I finally found a way to live that deferred adolescence. Generationally, for what generations are worth, I'm at the midpoint between the boomer generation and the GI generation. I had no biological identification with one side or the other of the generational conflict of the time, which was good because it gave me a feeling for both. Though technically I was past the magic age of 30, beyond which there was no trust and no hope and no life, my rejection of the older generation's notions of values and authority was by now complete. In my mind and heart, I was saying, your values suck. I reject your inherent authority. I don't buy that authority comes on a direct line from God to my parents, to my appointed church people, or to the police, or to anyone else. For me, all authority comes from within. All my power comes from within me. But the other side of me, the side that respected much about the GI generation and had nostalgia for it, could find fulfillment too. In the summer of 1972, I played Carnegie Hall. It not only meant validation, but arrival at a certain level. You may not really be on the same level as others who played there before you, but you now have something in common with them. Lenny worked Carnegie Hall. Stokowski worked Carnegie Hall. I worked Carnegie Hall. Fabulous. And it was an acknowledgement that I did accept certain kinds of authoritative wisdom. For example, that Carnegie Hall was a prestigious place to appear. A simpler pleasure was standing over on the northwest corner of 57th and 7th and watching people milling around outside the stage door. Summer night, and I'm thinking, here I am, where I used to stand waiting to get Gene Krupa's autograph. And now I'm going to come out the same doors where I once got his autograph 20 years earlier. Gene Krupa was my hero. I've had very few heroes in my life. Mostly they're people who've been arrested. But when Gene Krupa came out those doors, he had on a fucking camel's hair wraparound overcoat. He had the forelock hanging down in all its marvelous arranged casualness, and he had a terrific-looking blonde on each arm. With a big smile and chewing gum, I got his autograph, and all the other guys. Jazz at the Philharmonic. I still look at those autographs and play the music from that night. Carnegie was a completion of a loop, a coming back to a beginning. As usual, a price had to be paid for all this pleasure. I discovered in July of '72 that not only could you not say the Heavy Seven on television, you couldn't say them in Milwaukee either. Here's how the AP reported it. Comedian George Carlin was taken into custody Friday night and charged with disorderly conduct after he allegedly used profanity during a performance at Summerfest, a 10-day festival on the city's lakefront. Henry Jordan, executive director of Summerfest, said, "Carlin got up on stage and he used a lot of profanity. The police went up on stage after he had finished his act and arrested him." Jordan said he supported the police, adding that many in the crowd of 70,000 were children. According to the arresting officer and complainant, Patrolman Elmer G. Lenz, about 40 of the many thousands of children were youths in wheelchairs who were physically unable to leave the showgrounds even if they found the show was in bad taste. Of course, wheelchairs are so named because they include wheels, with which their occupants can propel themselves whenever they wish to go. But that wasn't foremost in Patrolman Lenz's mind in bringing their presence up. When it came to words, he knew right from wrong. Throughout the trial, I was represented by a distinguished civil rights attorney, William Coffey, who had also represented the Milwaukee activist Father Grappi. 5 months later, one Judge Geringer threw out the complaint, saying that while he had no doubt indecent language was used, he didn't believe anyone was violently aroused. Interesting, because at the concert I'd been talking about fuck, meaning loving, and at some point I'd told all these people that I'd like to fuck them. You'd think that would have aroused at least 1 or 2 Milwaukeeans in a crowd of 70,000. I'm a nice-looking guy, and I had more hair then. Actually, it wasn't a recording of the concert that was played in court for the judge, but the cut from Class Clown. During the recording, wrote the Milwaukee Journal, Judge Geringer grinned and laughed softly, though self-consciously. Patrolman Lenz was incensed by the judge's ruling and said the hearing was a railroad job, although the only person who could have been railroaded was me, and I hadn't been. Judge Geringer's decision sidestepped the little matter of the First Amendment and its pesky guarantee of free speech. That wasn't the case in my second bust. By now, what I refer to as the Milwaukee Seven had spawned a equally mind-rotting, spine-curving, piece without honor sequel called Filthy Words, which first appeared in Occupation Fool. I've also found 3 more words that you could never say on television, and they were fart, turd, and twat. Those 3. Fart we talked about, it's harmless, it's like tits, it's a cutesy word, no problem. Turd. You can't say, but who wants to? But the word twat is an interesting one. Twat. Right in the twat. Twat is the only slang word applying to a part of the sexual anatomy that doesn't have another meaning to it. Like snatch, box, and pussy. All have other meanings, man. Even in a Walt Disney movie, you can say, "We're going to snatch that pussy and put him in a box." But twat stands alone. On October 30th, 1973, WBAI in New York broadcast this cut during a program called Lunch Pail, in the course of a discussion about society's double standards toward language. The host warned the audience in advance that, if you don't like this sort of thing, don't listen. A New York man said a subsequent U.S. Supreme Court summary, who while driving with his young son, heard the WBAI broadcast, wrote a letter to the FCC complaining about the use of such language on the air. After some back and forth between the FCC and WBAI, the FCC released in 1975 a declaratory order concerning the broadcast of indecent language, defining indecent as words that describe, in terms patently offensive as measured by contemporary community standards, sexual or excretory activities and organs at a time of the day when there is a reasonable risk that children may be in the audience. The FCC found my routine to be indecent by that standard and put what amounted to a warning in WBAI's license file. WBAI, actually the Pacifica Foundation, which owns WBAI, fought it and won in the U.S. Court of Appeals. The FCC appealed to the Supreme Court, and in 1978 the Supreme Court, surprise, surprise, found in favor of the FCC 5-4. The Los Angeles Times ran the news as its front-page lead on July 3, 1978. Court bans 7 dirty words, blared the headline. Justice John Paul Stevens wrote the majority decision saying, "The broadcast media have established a uniquely pervasive presence in the lives of all Americans. Patently offensive, indecent material presented over the airwaves confronts the citizen in the privacy of his home, where the individual's right to be left alone plainly outweighs the First Amendment rights of an intruder. Why can't the individual reach out his or her hand and turn that little knob?" According to Stevens, to say that one may avoid further offense by turning off the radio when he hears indecent language is like saying that the remedy for an assault is to run away after the first blow. I'm no lawyer, but this guy seems to be saying that anyone whose language he finds indecent is like a burglar coming into his house with a gun or a mugger hitting him in the head with a pipe, which is a pretty paranoid view of free speech. Justice William Brennan wrote the dissent. In our land of cultural pluralism, there are many who think, act, and talk differently from the members of the court and who do not share their fragile sensibilities. It is only an acute, ethnocentric myopia that enables the court to approve censorship of the communications solely because of the words they contain. The court's decision is another of the dominant culture's efforts to force those groups who do not share its mores to conform to its own way of thinking, acting, and speaking. All right, Bill Brennan. We Irish stick together. And he got it right. Words were the issue. The court was banning not just words, but ways of thinking, acting, speaking, communicating with one another. There was plenty more hypocrisy at work. The original and sole complainant wasn't some average Joe who conceivably might have been speaking for contemporary community standards, if there are such things. He was a character named John Douglas, a member of the board of a big-time right-wing watchdog group called Morality and Media. John Douglas was, in Ned Hentoff's words, a professional offendee. Of course he couldn't turn off the radio, because that would have meant taking his right hand from its 10 to 2 o'clock position on the steering wheel and committing the hideous sin of reckless driving. But he could have told his young son to change the station. His young son was actually 15, several years older than I was when I made my original long hair fucking music, prick, kraut, cunt, burly, loudmouth, cocksucker list way back in 1950 in a simpler, more innocent time. Was John Douglas really claiming this angelic mid-70s teenager had never heard the word shit or fuck? Of course not. Other than turning out another fucked-up, tight-ass clone of himself, John Douglas's complaint showed not the slightest interest in his son's welfare. Poor kid. Kids are always the giveaway. Young sons, youths in wheelchairs, The main reason to outlaw indecency, wrote John Stevens in his majority opinion, is that broadcasting is uniquely accessible to children, even those too young to read, which in turn means that the only thing you can safely broadcast anytime, anywhere, in any medium is material that's suitable for kids. Could this be why our society shows so many signs of arrested development? FCC and Pacifica Foundation has become a standard case to teach in communications classes at many law schools. I take perverse pride in that. I'm actually a footnote in the judicial history of America. The one part of this I really love is that all 9 members of the Burger Court had to sit around listening to the filthy words cut from Occupation Fool. I've often wondered if, during the presentation of the evidence against me, any of them grinned and laughed softly, though self-consciously.